Hello and welcome to Unmissable Movies with me, Stephen Hayes.
And me, Sam Cox. Yeah! I'm back.
Welcome back, my friend.
Hey, thanks. It feels like a long gap, but I'm glad to be back in the mix.
It's good to have you back. So you've moved from Maryland to Hollywood.
Almost.
Pretty much. Jim Henson did the same journey. He was in Maryland and then moved to LA.
I've noticed in my absence, we've talked about the Muppets and Kermit quite a lot. You've been busy, and I applaud you for it.
You got to give the people what they want.
And today, we're giving the people what they want. A reaction to Ratched.
Yes, we are. So, Netflix have just in the last week released Ratched. A couple of months ago, we did a podcast on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And so we thought we'd give our reaction to... we're going to condense it to the first episode. So there won't be any major spoilers or anything. But yeah, we want to give our take on what we thought of Sarah Paulson and where we think it's going to go.
Yeah, and so, I'm going to start by just saying I was when you mentioned it to me, that they were actually even doing it, I thought, wow, that's really cool. This is a character that I love, and we obviously had just done the podcast on the movie from the 70s. So I was pretty excited to see what it was going to be. And then I saw the teaser trailer and I thought, interesting. This is like not what I was expecting at all. And then obviously now having seen the whole first episode, I've definitely got some thoughts. And I think I'll just dive right in, man. I just think, I was thinking about it after I saw the episode, and it feels to me like somebody has delivered up like a very, very sumptuous box of very indulgent chocolate wrapped in like a beautiful velvet bow that in the end doesn't actually taste very good. Like the chocolate's kind of crap, and you wonder why you wasted all that money on it. That's how I felt after watching it.
I almost felt like stylistically it was far closer to The Shining than One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Well, I suppose the distinction is that the movie from the 70s isn't primarily a psychological horror movie, as much as it is a kind of psychological, I suppose it's grounded in drama and some realism. And so obviously this is a complete genre departure, for one, which was surprising. And I think, so I think like my first issue was like, hey, I'm invested in a character that I'm familiar with from a particular genre, be it, from the original novel and the movie. And I'm kind of being asked to switch worlds in order to get her backstory. And so yeah, that was one of the first things. There was this disassociation of like, well, this feels like a completely different universe than the one I'm used to Mildred Ratched inhabiting. So it was just from the very beginning that was a hurdle that I think either you're willing to just jump over and go cool, or maybe not. So that was my initial thought.
For me, you spend the entirety of the 1975 movie questioning her motives. Is she putting the patients first, or has she got this strange mean streak, or at best, and downright evil at worst? But you're questioning that throughout the film, and then it's not until the end where Billy does what Billy does, where you think, yeah, she knew what she was doing there. Whereas in this, they've gone the other way, and it's like, no, straight away, she's pretty evil and will do anything to get herself ahead, which felt like maybe do that throughout the course of a season, but for that to be the first episode, just felt like, whoa. And what did you think of Sarah Paulson in the role?
Well, so I think in general, the cast are doing a very, very good job of kind of bringing what they can to the material, which I think is probably ultimately the downfall of this whole thing is the writing. Or not necessarily. I think some of the actual dialogue is excellent. But Sarah Paulson, if this show works at all for anyone, it's probably because of her gravity and nuance. And so I think, if I'm going to keep watching it, that's probably why, it's to see how she continues to handle this role. And I think, so far that would probably be most people's feeling, is that this whole thing feels a bit like a bit of a mess in terms of narrative and plot. And some of the material that the actors have been given to work with is just like, okay, where do we go with this? And I think they've done a good job of making it compelling. And yeah, I think she's great.
Yeah.
I really admire her. From things past.
Yeah. Did you see her in the? Did you see her in the O.J. Simpson?
Yeah, I did.
Thing with
where
David
she played
Schwimmer?
the lawyer. So good.
She was so good in that. Yeah. Yeah. So I think she's very much doing an evocation of the role rather than trying to do a like for like match.
Mm-hmm.
She's doing her own thing with it, really. But you can, with a bit of suspension of disbelief, you can believe that is the same character. I don't think it helps that Sarah Paulson's actually 4 years older than Louise Fletcher was playing the role. So she's playing a younger version as an older woman, which is just about works, but I think they could have gone for someone, perhaps an unknown, I don't know, but it felt like I had to kind of lay aside what I knew of that character in order to enjoy that first episode.
Well, and I think that's probably, for me, that's the flaw of the whole thing. Like, there's so much disassociation that it feels like they've just misappropriated the name Ratched in order to kind of hook people in. But ultimately, there's almost no connection. To me, there was no emotional connection with what I was watching and what I already knew about this character. Because I think the idea is really cool. Like, hey, let's do a backstory to this kind of iconic villain, which is not a new idea. We've had Joker and we've had
Maleficent.
Maleficent, all kinds of things along this road. But I think the fact that it just doesn't feel like the same world made me. I just almost instantly wasn't interested anymore because all of my pre-investment was just being kind of like pissed all over, as this show kind of just does almost whatever it wants and doesn't really mind. So I'm interested to hear that they're gonna, well, for one, that they're gonna keep making it. I think there's been 2 seasons have been slated, and officially, and maybe it'll go on to more. And I think, and as Sarah Paulson maybe mentioned herself, that they will introduce R.P. McMurphy at some point.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I was trying to think, and we tried to do this when we did the podcast to try and think who could now play R.P. McMurphy and take over that role from Jack Nicholson. Now, I've got a little bit left field and a little bit not. But I was thinking, if I was in that casting chair, I would so go for Andrew Scott.
Oh,
so he's
yes.
he's the guy who played Moriarty in the BBC Sherlock.
That's a great shout.
Yeah, so appearance-wise, even it's not terrible.
He actually looks like that young, quite skinny, early years Nicholson.
Yeah, so I feel like that could be a really interesting. And he's better known now, but he's not so big that he wouldn't do a Netflix show. So I think that would be a really cool thing to see. Any ideas if you weren't to cast him, if you said, "Oh, I'm not available," where else could you go?
we kind of were hitting blanks a couple months ago, and we tried to think of this. But another person that's come to mind is James McAvoy, because he has that kind of he's done roles similarly with that kind of psychological intensity.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
And he does have the kind of the gravity, which I think would be a cool thing with this show if they were able to go there eventually and try to tie together what we already know about her world, from previous things. Another thing I was thinking about is how with certain characters that have this kind of like iconic evil, and we mentioned this with when we were talking about Gary Oldman's character in Leon, one of the things that sometimes adds to the thing that's scary about them is you have no idea about their motivations. Like there's actually a gap there in their story that makes what they're doing even scarier.
Totally.
I think that's, and so I think that's worth saying. For me, I actually think that like Ken Kesey in his original novel doesn't spend time on her backstory, and whilst I like the idea of fleshing it out, I just think that you lose something of the like, why is she so dang evil?
Yeah.
When you go ahead and spell it out and explain it.
Yeah.
So that was another thing for me that I just thought, you know what, I don't actually feel invested enough. I don't want to necessarily even know why, because there's a mystique, there's an enigmatic thing with villains that I think sometimes you can end up doing the the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain moment too much.
Yeah, totally.
So
I think I see why this modern day desire to do the backstory on the villain, because otherwise you've just got countless villains who, why the evil? Well, they just want to take over the world. To what end? Well, just general power, I suppose. So it's sometimes it's nice to give a little bit of of where the villain's coming from and a little bit of nuance. But equally, like the Joker in The Dark Knight, he's got no clear motive, and it makes him scarier. So you're right. I think you want this show to take you up to the point where she's sat there with the group in Cuckoo's Nest, and in that scene, she doesn't seem evil. She seems fine, and it's she won an Oscar for it because it was subtle. There was little glances, little idiosyncrasies that just all led to the mystique, and it's evident in the fact that however many years later, 45 years later, they're making a show on it because she was that good. And it's almost oxymoronic that now we're delving into the stuff that made her mysterious in the first place. So for me, I'm thinking cool to have tried it. I don't think it's a big fail, and I might keep going with it, but equally I'm not like, oh yeah, they smashed it.
Agreed.
Well, great to have you back, Sam, and I'm looking forward to delving into something next week.
As am I. Cheers, Steve. See you next time.
Nice one. Thanks so much for watching. Do you agree with our assessment of Ratched? Did you make it all the way through the series? And who would you have cast as RP McMurphy? Get involved in the comments section below. Again, we're still finding our feet here, so if you are able to subscribe, that would really help us out. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.